Under the relentless desert sun, a millionaire finds himself stranded, his luxury car useless, a flat tire leaving him helpless. Far from his accustomed world of convenience, desperation begins to creep in. Just as he starts to accept defeat, despite his vast wealth, a flicker of hope appears in the distance. What happens next will reveal the profound mistake he's made his entire life. Join us in sharing meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly, shimmering under the brutal sun. Samuel Whitaker, a retired millionaire in his late 60s, drummed his fingers on the steering wheel of his sleek convertible. He leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow. The merciless Arizona heat and the desert's silence amplified his growing frustration. Samuel glanced at his Rolex, a trophy from a life of calculated investments and high-stakes deals. A flat tire was an annoyance he rarely encountered. He was a man who solved problems with a phone call, but out here miles from the nearest gas station, even his wealth felt useless. Just as he was resigning himself to a long wait, a figure emerged on the horizon. At first it was merely a blur against the heat waves, but as it drew closer, Samuel made out a young boy pedaling a battered bicycle with a small basket. No older than 14, the boy wore a faded baseball cap and a worn shirt, his dusty sneakers kicking up small clouds as he rode. Stopping a few feet from the car, he hopped off his bike, letting it rest on its rusted kickstand. He approached with cautious confidence, his eyes scanning the situation before meeting Samuel's. "Got a flat tire, huh?" the boy asked, his voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "Yes, and no signal to call for help," Samuel replied, his tone initially sharp with impatience but softening at the boy's calm demeanor. The boy nodded, glancing at the flat tire. "I can help you fix it if you've got a spare." Samuel hesitated. This kid, no older than the grandsons he barely knew, was offering help without hesitation. Samuel rarely accepted assistance, especially from a stranger, but with the desert sun bearing down and no other options, he gestured toward the trunk. The boy went to work with surprising efficiency. He pulled out the spare, set up the jack, and began loosening the lug nuts. Samuel watched in silence, a strange mix of gratitude and embarrassment washing over him. Here he was, a man who had built an empire, relying on the kindness of a kid in dusty sneakers. "Where'd you learn to do this?" Samuel asked after a moment. "My dad showed me," the boy replied without looking up. "He said it's important to know how to fix things yourself. Not everyone can afford to call for help." The words struck Samuel harder than expected. Not afford to call for help. That thought had never crossed his mind, but it was a harsh reality for this boy, a reality Samuel had long been removed from. When the boy finished, he stood brushing the dust off his hands. "All done," he said, a small smile breaking across his sunburned face. Samuel reached into his wallet, pulling out a crisp $100 bill. "Here, take this. I appreciate what you've done." But the boy shook his head, stepping back. "No sir, you don't have to pay me. Just glad I could help." Samuel froze, the bill still in his hand. He was accustomed to transactions, to gratitude that could be bought, but this boy wanted nothing in return. He watched as the boy hopped back on his bike, pedaling off down the dusty road without a second glance. For the rest of the drive, Samuel couldn't shake the boy's words or his quiet dignity. It wasn't just the act of kindness, it was the way it was given, freely and without expectation. That night, as Samuel sat alone in his sprawling, immaculate home, he realized something about the encounter had stirred a part of him he'd long forgotten. Samuel Whitaker couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, surrounded by the trophies of success. A mahogany desk, walls lined with books he rarely read, and a collection of framed photos from corporate events where his smile never quite reached his eyes. It all felt hollow. The memory of the boy with his dusty sneakers and simple kindness lingered like an unsolved puzzle. Why didn't he take the money? Samuel had encountered countless people, all eager to be rewarded for the smallest favors. Yet this boy, who clearly didn't have much, had walked away without asking for a thing. Baffled him. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared out at the manicured lawn of his estate. The boy had mentioned learning to fix things from his father. Samuel thought back to his own childhood in a small Ohio town where his father had worked tirelessly as a mechanic to keep food on the table. Those were simpler times before the boardrooms, the stock portfolios, and the relentless pursuit of wealth had consumed his life. Something about the boy reminded him of that simpler life, and it gnawed at him. He had spent decades building his fortune, but when was the last time he truly helped someone without expecting anything in return? The answer eluded him. The next morning, Samuel found himself unable to focus on his usual routine. His assistant had scheduled a round of golf with high-profile investors, but he cancelled. Instead, he found himself driving back down that same stretch of road where he'd met the boy. He didn't fully understand why, he just knew he had to. As he drove past the spot where the boy had helped him, his eyes scanned the horizon, hoping for a glimpse of that faded baseball cap or the rusted bicycle. Hours passed and Samuel stopped at every small diner, gas station and store, asking if anyone knew a boy who fit the description. Finally, at a small grocery store with creaky floors and a hand-painted sign, he got his answer. The elderly cashier looked up from her crossword puzzle when Samuel described the boy. "You talking about Jesse?" she said, her voice warm but laced with curiosity. "That boy's always helping folks around here. Lives up the road with his ma." "His mother?" Samuel asked, leaning forward. The woman nodded, gesturing toward a dusty gravel road. "Yeah, in that old yellow house near the woods. Good folks, but they've had it rough since Jesse's dad passed a couple of years ago." Samuel felt a pang in his chest. "Thank you," he said, slipping her a generous tip before heading back to his car. As he drove toward the yellow house, his mind raced. What would he say? Why was he even doing this? He told himself it was just to thank the boy properly, but deep down he knew it was more than that. Jesse's act of kindness had stirred something in him, a need to reconnect with a part of himself he'd forgotten. The house came into view, modest and worn but well kept. A rickety porch sagged under time's weight, and a small garden struggled in the rocky soil. Samuel parked and sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He stepped out, smoothing his blazer as he approached the porch. Before he could knock, the screen door creaked open and there stood Jesse, his baseball cap pushed back, a curious look on his face. "Mr. Whitaker?" Jesse asked, surprised. Samuel smiled, a bit awkwardly. "Hello, Jesse. I hope I'm not intruding." Behind Jesse, a woman appeared. His mother, Samuel assumed. She was in her early 40s with a warm but tired expression. "Can we help you?" she asked cautiously, wiping her hands on a towel. Samuel cleared his throat. "I just wanted to thank Jesse again for helping me the other day. And I'd like to speak with you both if you don't mind." The woman exchanged a glance with Jesse before stepping aside. "Come on in," she said, her tone polite but guarded. As Samuel stepped into the small living room, he noticed the signs of struggle. Patched furniture, worn carpet, the faint smell of dampness. Despite its modesty, the house radiated warmth. Family photos lined the walls and a handmade quilt lay folded on the couch. It was a far cry from Samuel's sprawling mansion, but it felt more like a home. Jesse's mother offered him a seat and they sat across from him, their eyes filled with quiet curiosity. "You didn't have to come all the way out here," she said gently. "I know," Samuel replied, his voice sincere. "But Jesse's kindness left an impression on me. He didn't have to help me, but he did, and when I offered him money he refused. That's rare these days." Jesse shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "It wasn't a big deal, sir." "But it was," Samuel insisted. "It was to me. And I'd like to do something for you in return." Jesse's mother tilted her head, her expression softening. "We're fine, Mr. Whitaker. We don't expect anything." "I understand," Samuel said, leaning forward. "But sometimes it's okay to accept help just as you've taught Jesse to give it." The room fell silent for a moment and Samuel could see the hesitation in their eyes. He realized then that this wasn't just about gratitude, it was about paying forward a lesson he had forgotten. What Jesse and his mother didn't know was that Samuel had a plan. They had reminded him of the values he'd lost along the way, and he wasn't about to walk away without showing them how much that meant to him. Samuel left the yellow house that day with more than just gratitude in his heart. He left with purpose. Driving back to his estate, the sun setting behind him, he thought about what Jesse's mother had said, "We don't expect anything." That sentence stayed with him. It wasn't spoken out of pride, but resilience. Samuel could see that life hadn't been easy for them. Despite their struggles, they held on to a quiet dignity that moved him in ways he hadn't expected. The next morning, Samuel sat at his kitchen table, his untouched coffee growing cold as he scribbled notes on a yellow legal pad. Ideas flowed quickly. Plans for the house, ways to help Jesse and his mother without making them feel like a charity case. It had to be done right. Samuel made calls to contractors, suppliers, and even an old friend who worked in community outreach. He didn't share all the details, just that he wanted to help a family in need. By mid-afternoon, he had assembled a small team of professionals willing to work on short notice. Later that week, Samuel found himself back in Harland, standing on Jesse's porch with a clipboard in hand. Jesse and his mother stepped outside, their expressions puzzled as they saw the two trucks parked in front of their house. One carried tools and lumber, the other supplies and a small crew of workers. "What's all this?" Jesse's mother asked, her brow furrowing with concern. Samuel smiled warmly, trying to put her at ease. "This is my way of saying thank you," he said. "You told me you didn't expect anything, but sometimes a little help goes a long way." Jesse's eyes widened as he took in the scene. "You're fixing the house?" he asked, his voice a mix of excitement and disbelief. Samuel nodded. "I noticed the porch could use some work and the roof, well, it's got more leaks than I can count. Let me help you with this." Jesse's mother hesitated, her hands wringing the dish towel she always seemed to have nearby. "Mr. Whitaker, we appreciate the gesture, but we can't afford. It's already taken care of," Samuel interrupted gently. "Consider it a gift. No strings attached." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Why would you do this for us?" she finally asked. Samuel's expression softened. "Because your son reminded me of something important. What it means to truly give without expecting anything in return. It's a lesson I needed, and this is how I honor it." The workers began unloading supplies, and Samuel explained each step of the renovations to Jesse and his mother. The porch would be rebuilt, the roof replaced, and the interior upgraded to make the house more comfortable. It wasn't about luxury. It was about giving them a home that reflected their strength and spirit. Jesse, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "Can I help?" he asked, his eyes lighting up. Samuel chuckled. "I thought you might say that. You've got a knack for fixing things, don't you?" The boy grinned, and Samuel motioned to one of the contractors. "This is Joe. He'll show you the ropes, but remember, you've got to do your homework first." "Deal." Jesse nodded eagerly. "Deal." Over the next few weeks, the little yellow house underwent a transformation. The sagging porch was replaced with sturdy wood, the roof patched and painted, and the interior walls given a fresh coat of warm, inviting colors. Jesse was there every step of the way, learning from the crew and asking questions about tools and techniques. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Samuel found himself spending more and more time on the site. One day, as the sun dipped low and the workers packed up for the evening, Samuel stood beside Jesse and his mother on the new porch. Jesse's mother looked out at the yard, her expression a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. "This house, it feels like a fresh start," she said softly. Samuel turned to her, his voice steady. "That's exactly what it's meant to be." Jesse leaned against the railing, his face thoughtful. "Mr. Whitaker, why are you really doing this? I mean, it's amazing, but it feels like more than just fixing a house." Samuel paused, his gaze drifting to the horizon. "You're right, Jesse. It is more. Meeting you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That helping people, truly helping them, is the greatest wealth a person can have. And if I can pass that lesson on even to just one person, then I've done something worthwhile." Jesse nodded slowly, as if the weight of Samuel's words was sinking in. As the evening air grew cooler, Samuel looked at the boy and his mother, standing on the porch of a house that now shone with possibility. This wasn't just about gratitude anymore. It was about creating a ripple effect, an act of kindness that could inspire more. The work wasn't done, but the foundation had been laid. For Samuel, this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind of transformation, not just for the little yellow house but for everyone involved. The porch was rebuilt, the roof repaired, and the interior revitalized with fresh paint and sturdy new furniture. Every detail seemed to breathe life back into the home, and Jesse was at its center, his hands covered in paint and sawdust, his grin never far from his face. Samuel made it a point to be there every day, overseeing the progress and spending time with Jesse. For a man who had spent decades chasing financial success, standing in the backyard of a small-town home, watching a boy hammer nails into a plank of wood, felt oddly fulfilling. It was work that didn't require contracts or board meetings, just heart and effort. Jesse's curiosity about tools and techniques quickly grew into a genuine passion. One of the contractors, Joe, took a particular liking to him and began teaching him the basics of construction. Jesse soaked it all in, his excitement evident in his endless questions and tireless work alongside the crew. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, Jesse approached Samuel holding a worn notebook. His face was serious, a stark contrast to his usual cheerful demeanor. "Mr. Whitaker," Jesse began, his voice steady, "I've been thinking. I want to be able to build things one day, houses, bridges, maybe even skyscrapers. Do you think that's something I can do?" Samuel crouched down to meet Jesse's eye level, his gaze firm but warm. "Jesse, you can do anything you set your mind to. But it takes hard work, patience, and a belief in yourself." The boy nodded, his grip tightening on the notebook. "I think I'm ready to work hard." Samuel smiled. "Then let's make a plan." That evening, as the work crew packed up and the yard quieted, Samuel sat on the porch with Jesse and his mother. He pulled out his phone and made a few calls. One to a local school administrator, another to a scholarship foundation he had long supported but rarely engaged with personally. "I know a few people who can help," Samuel said, looking at Jesse's mother. "Jesse has potential, he just needs the right opportunities." Her eyes welled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away, her voice shaking as she said, "I don't know how to thank you. What you've done for us, for Jesse." Samuel held up a hand, stopping her. "There's no need for thanks. Jesse's already given me more than I could ever repay." The following days brought more surprises for Jesse. Samuel had arranged for him to shadow a team of local engineers working on a new community project. It wasn't just about fostering Jesse's interest. It was about showing him what was possible, giving him a glimpse of the future he could build for himself. One evening, as the sun set behind the newly repaired house, Jesse and Samuel stood side by side in the yard. Jesse's mother called from the porch, inviting them in for dinner, but Jesse lingered for a moment. "Mr. Whitaker," Jesse began, looking up at the older man with a sincerity that made Samuel's chest tighten, "do you think helping people is the most important thing?" Samuel looked at the boy, his heart swelling with pride and a newfound sense of purpose. "I think it's the only thing that really matters, Jesse." Jesse nodded, as though the answer confirmed something he had already known deep down. Then he broke into a grin. "I guess I'd better keep learning then." As they walked back to the house together, Samuel felt a sense of contentment he hadn't known in years. It wasn't about the money he'd spent or the work he'd overseen. It was about the connections he'd built, the lives he'd touched, and the legacy he was beginning to leave behind. That night, as laughter filled the small but now vibrant home, Samuel realized he had found something far greater than success. He had found meaning. As the months passed, the little yellow house stood as a beacon of transformation and hope, not just for Jesse and his family but for the entire neighborhood. Its repaired porch, vibrant coat of paint, and flourishing garden became a symbol of resilience. Children often played near its fence, drawn by the new swing set and the warmth of Jesse's laughter echoing through the yard. Samuel continued to visit regularly. What began as occasional check-ins soon became a routine of mentorship, Sunday dinners, and quiet moments spent watching Jesse grow into his newfound potential. Samuel had found a second family, and in their company, the walls of his once isolated world began to crumble. Jesse's passion for building only grew stronger with Samuel's guidance. He applied for a summer program focused on engineering and construction for young students. When the acceptance letter arrived, Jesse's joy was infectious. His mother beamed with pride, hugging him tightly while Samuel stood in the background, a soft smile on his face. "It's just the start, Jesse," Samuel said, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Keep going, and one day you'll be building things people will talk about for generations." "I will," Jesse promised, his eyes shining with determination. As Jesse thrived, Samuel couldn't help but reflect on his own journey. He thought about the years spent accumulating wealth and status, only to realize that none of it had brought him the fulfillment he had found in this small Kentucky town. One warm spring afternoon, Jesse and his mother surprised Samuel with a gathering in the yard of their now bustling home. Friends, neighbors, and even some of the workers who had helped rebuild the house were there. A long table was covered in homemade dishes, and the air was filled with music and laughter. Samuel, who rarely found himself caught off guard, was visibly moved. "What's all this?" he asked, looking around at the smiling faces. Jesse stepped forward, holding a small wooden plaque he had carved himself, its edges slightly uneven but brimming with care. The inscription read, "In gratitude to Samuel Whitaker for showing us the strength of kindness and the power of believing in each other." Samuel's voice caught in his throat as he accepted the plaque. "I don't deserve this," he said, his eyes misty. Jesse grinned. "You taught me that it's not about deserving, it's about showing up." The crowd cheered and Samuel couldn't help but laugh, his heart swelling with pride. That night, as the celebration wound down and the stars filled the sky, Samuel and Jesse sat on the porch, sipping sweet tea. The boy leaned back in his chair, looking at Samuel with the candid curiosity of youth. "What's next for you, Mr. Whitaker?" Jesse asked. Samuel paused, staring out at the yard. For the first time in a long while he felt no urgency to chase the next deal or close the next big opportunity. Instead he felt a quiet resolve. "I think," Samuel said slowly, "it's time I help more people like you." The idea had been simmering in the back of his mind for weeks. He would start a foundation aimed at helping underprivileged youth in small towns access education, mentorship, and resources. Jesse would be his first success story, but not the last. Jesse's face lit up. "You mean kids like me?" Samuel nodded. "Exactly like you. The world needs more builders, dreamers, and people who aren't afraid to help someone in need." Years later, the foundation Samuel started in Jesse's honor had transformed countless lives, providing scholarships, training programs, and mentorship opportunities across the country. The little yellow house in Kentucky became a landmark of sorts, a place where visitors came to see where it all began. Jesse, now a young man and a rising engineer, often spoke at events for the foundation, sharing the story of how a simple act of kindness had changed everything. Samuel, now in his twilight years, watched from the sidelines, his heart full as he saw the seeds of his efforts flourish. One evening, as they stood together on the porch, Jesse looked at Samuel with gratitude etched into every feature of his face. "You know," Jesse said, "you didn't just help us rebuild a house, you helped me find a future." Samuel smiled, his voice soft but resolute. "And you reminded me what life is really about, Jesse. It's not about what we have, it's about what we give." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the yard, Samuel felt a peace he hadn't known in decades. The legacy he had once measured in numbers and accolades was now written in lives changed and futures brightened. And for him that was more than enough. And now join the movement for justice. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and make these stories a part of your daily life. Together we can create change.